Can you come up with any solutions to end the gun violence problem that doesn't involve the federal government? Is there anything the federal government cannot, should not, and will not regulate? If the Brady campaign really isn't against the ownership of guns, why did they oppose the plaintiff's arguments in the D.C. versus Heller case? If an assault weapons ban will work, why did the Columbine shooting happen during the first assault weapons ban? Did you know that Bill Clinton's Department of Justice said that the assault weapons ban was ineffective in stopping violent crimes? If universal background checks, a ban on assault weapons, and a ban on 30-round magazines is all you want, how do you explain Connecticut, where gun permits cost about $300? How do you explain gun registration laws in California? How do you explain handgun registration laws in New Jersey? How do you explain background checks for ammunition purchases in California? Are you ever going to tell the federal government that we have enough gun control laws after an assault weapons ban, magazine capacity limits, and universal background checks are passed? Because you already don't tell the state governments of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, California, or Hawaii when enough is enough. Here is a list of things the mainstream media, especially CNN, have been wrong about. The Duke University Blue Devils lacrosse team, the University of Virginia's Phi Kappa Psi fraternity, Richard Jewell, Donald Trump not getting the Republican nomination for the presidency, Trump not winning the 2016 election, the Blue Wave, Trump colluding with Russia to win the election, the Covington boys, Jussie Smollett and his attackers, just to name a few. Knowing this, why should we take the mainstream media seriously when they talk about guns? Bryan Cranston, Amy Schumer, Chelsea Handler, Barbara Streisand, Lena Dunham, Ne-Yo, Jon Stewart, Neve Campbell, Barry Diller, Keegan-Michael Key, Chloe Sevigny, Al Sharpton, Eddie Griffin, Spike Lee, Amber Rose, Samuel L. Jackson, Cher, George Lopez, Raymond Simone, Whoopi Goldberg, Omari Hardwick, and Miley Cyrus all said they would leave America if Donald Trump won the 2016 election. Trump is about to get re-elected, and yet those celebrities are still here. So, when you liberals say you don't want to ban all guns, why should I believe you? J.B. Pritzker lied that he wouldn't tax the middle class or the poor in Illinois, but then goes on to unleash a gas tax that the middle class and poor will also have to pay for. So, J.B., if you were to say that you believe in the Second Amendment, why should I believe you? Richard Blumenthal, you lied about serving in Vietnam to get elected. So, whenever you say that you believe in this Constitution, why should I believe you? Hillary Clinton, you lied about being under sniper fire in Bosnia, so when you say that you respect the Second Amendment or that you don't want to take anyone's guns, why should I believe you? Hillary Clinton, why do you claim to respect the Second Amendment and then behind closed doors say that the Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment regarding the Heller versus D.C. decision? Barack Obama, you once said if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, which turned out to be incorrect. You also said that Trump would never be president, so when you say that you weren't out to get everybody's guns, why should I believe you? If the Second Amendment only applies to muskets, then does the First Amendment only apply to parchment, quill, and your voice? Did you know that, contrary to what you heard from Michael Moore or the Young Turks, there were other firearms than just muskets when the Second Amendment was written? There were also weapons such as the flintlock pistol, the puckle gun, and the cannon, just to name a few. If all modern firearms used today aren't protected by the Second Amendment, then should the internet, social media, and television not be protected by the First Amendment? Why do you attack the Second Amendment with technology that didn't exist at the time the First Amendment was written? How is the National Guard a state militia when it is federally funded, uses federally owned weapons, clothing, equipment, etc., and has bases on federal land? Why do you say that the Second Amendment only applies to a militia, but call groups like the White Mountain Militia, Oath Keepers, and the Bundy Brothers terrorists? If the Second Amendment only applies to a militia, then why does it say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed and not the right of the militia? Have you ever read the dictionary definition of the word militia? I have. Have you ever read the dictionary definition of the word regulate? I've done that as well. Do you know that at the time the Constitution was written, the word regulate meant to make regular? Can you show me where in the dictionary where the word regulate means to put under government control? If a group of men in California, New Mexico, Arizona, or Texas formed an armed militia and patrolled the Mexican border to keep illegal immigrants from crossing the border, would you support them? Would that count as a well-regulated militia? If not, then why? If a group of armed men marched on Chicago to keep the criminals in check, would that count as a well-regulated militia? A well-balanced breakfast being necessary for the start of a healthy day, the right of the people to keep and eat food shall not be infringed. Who has the right to eat food, the people or the well-balanced breakfast? A well-schooled electorate being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and read books shall not be infringed. Who has the right to read books, the people or the well-schooled electorate? How dare you accuse the NRA of aiding criminals when people like you welcome criminals from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador into the United States? How dare you accuse the NRA of aiding criminals when people who enter the country illegally are given sanctuary in your cities? How dare you accuse the NRA of aiding criminals when Obama-appointed judges kept letting murderers, drug dealers, and rapists out of jail and back on the streets they terrorize? How dare you accuse the NRA of aiding criminals when you want to give criminals, including the Boston Marathon bomber, the right to vote? How dare you accuse the NRA of aiding criminals when you voted for a criminal for president in 2016? What good will gun control laws do if criminals aren't put away and prosecuted? What good are laws if they aren't enforced? How dare you accuse the NRA of aiding criminals when you refuse to call out Antifa and Black Lives Matter for its violent riots and anti-police rhetoric? Why does Black Lives Matter get a free pass for chanting pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon? If it is impossible to round up 11 million illegal immigrants and kick them out of the country, how are you going to take away 500 million plus guns? How will gun control stop Mexican cartels from smuggling drugs and sex slaves into America? If all the gun control laws you've ever asked for are passed, and Mexican cartels, MS-13, and other crime syndicates from Central America are still wielding automatic AK-47s, are you going to push for more gun control in the United States? Or are you going to ask Mexico to make stricter gun laws because you already don't do that? Why must I undergo a background check to purchase a gun, but military-aged men from the most violent, impoverished, and disease-ridden places on earth be allowed to enter the United States with no questions asked? Kyle Kulinski, you once said in a Fox News appearance that most dreamers obey the law, so the government should leave them alone. While I'm willing to agree with you, most people who own semi-automatic rifles purchase their guns legally and will never go on a shooting, so why should they be regulated by this unpredictable beast you call government? Why is it fascist when armed government agents find those who broke immigration laws and send them out, but it's okay if armed agents go from door to door to confiscate guns from people who never committed a crime? Why do you not hold illegal immigrants to the same standards you hold gun owners to? When ordinary American citizens refuse to surrender their AR-15s and you send cops over to their houses to arrest them, will you separate the children from their families? Why can't I find the word assault weapon in the dictionary? Can you show me where in the dictionary assault is a pronoun? Did you know that the term assault weapon was invented by ignorant, crazy politicians to scare ignorant know-nothings like you? What constitutes an assault weapon? If the NRA disappeared like you wanted to, are you absolutely sure Republicans will start supporting gun control? Do you really expect me to believe that Republicans like Rand Paul and Ted Cruz will suddenly support gun control if the NRA is taken out of the picture? Newsflash, they won't. If the NRA is actually dismantled, are you ready for Gun Owners of America, the National Institution for Gun Rights, and the Second Amendment Foundation to fill in the void? Because that's what's going to happen. Are you aware that labor unions and Planned Parenthood give more money to Democrats than the NRA gives to Republicans? Why are labor unions and Planned Parenthood allowed to lobby but not gun rights organizations? Why are Democrats allowed to take lobbying money but not Republicans? How can you be sure that most NRA members support gun control when such polls were never made public? And the leadership that doesn't support gun control is still in leadership. If most Americans want gun control, how come residents of states like Kentucky, Montana, Wyoming, Michigan, Texas, Tennessee, Kansas, Vermont, Ohio, New Hampshire, and Maine haven't voted for politicians at the state level that will enact stricter gun control laws in those states? How come predominantly Democrat states like Vermont, Michigan, Minnesota, Colorado, New Mexico, and Washington State don't have the strict gun control laws you claim most Americans want? Why have the Democrats in those Democrat states not elected politicians that will support gun control laws? Why was it wrong for the U.S. military to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it's okay if Eric Swalwell uses nukes against Americans who defied his gun control laws like he said he would? You talk a lot about how the NRA defends gun manufacturers and not gun owners. Well, how exactly are you defending gun owners? Because I can write a book about how you don't. How are you defending gun owners when you demand that we be subject to the will of an unpredictable and untrustworthy government? Where do you think the money gun manufacturers make comes from? Do you think it grows on trees? If Americans truly want gun control, then why are so many Americans buying guns? In the event of a civil war, how many police and military personnel will fight on your side when all you do is vilify them and blame them for everything? If you truly don't want to confiscate everybody's guns, then what exactly do you mean when you say you want less guns? If President Trump proves he is a racist by denying it, and denial of rape culture proves that rape culture exists, but then by that same logic, when you deny that you want to ban and confiscate all guns and single out white conservatives and libertarians for extermination, are you proving that that is exactly what you want to do? Why do you accuse gun nuts of living in the past when you people are constantly bringing up the past? Examples include slavery, the Crusades, the time when women weren't allowed to vote, Jim Crow laws, and the Native American wars. Why do you accuse gun owners of living in the 18th century but turn a blind eye to women, blacks, and Native Americans who still think they're living in the 19th century, as well as Muslims who still think they're in the 7th century? If you think that making certain guns illegal will stop mass shootings, then why don't we simply make mass shootings illegal? While we're at it, why don't we make murder illegal as well? Why do you say you're not anti-gun or anti-Second Amendment with all the gun control laws you want to push, but then argue that anyone who calls for border security is a racist? And why do you say that you're not anti-Second Amendment with all the gun control laws you want passed, but then say that anyone who opposes gun control wants children to die? Why do you say that you're not anti-Second Amendment or anti-gun with all the laws you want to push onto people like me, but then say that anyone who opposes welfare or universal health care hates poor people? Why do you claim that you want a middle ground when it comes to solving gun violence problems, but when the 2018 CNN town hall already proved that you don't? Why are you against stand your ground laws? Seriously, why is a criminal's right to harm others more important than my right to life and liberty? Did you know that in Illinois, a gun owner can't take action to defend himself from a criminal who breaks into his house or car unless his life or his loved one's life is in danger? With dumb laws like that in mind, how dare you accuse the NRA of aiding criminals when you demand politicians put dumb laws like these into place? Why does the King James Bible not mention what tool Cain used to kill Abel? Who did God hold accountable for Abel's death? Cain or whatever inanimate object he used? Can you show me one real-life event where two disgruntled rednecks got into an argument in public and shot each other because the gun control laws weren't strong enough? Did it ever occur to you that most gun homicides in America are gang-related? Did it ever occur to you that most of the gang violence in inner cities is all drug-related? How will gun control stop the flow of drugs in this country? The drug war has only caused more drugs to contaminate the country, as well as embolden the drug cartels. The war on terror has created more terrorist cells. Both wars have killed more people than drugs or terrorists, so how do you think a war on guns and gun owners will end? Did you know that the prohibition on alcohol didn't work? Why do you claim that legalizing drugs will put illegal drug dealers out of business but never hold gun owners, gun retailers, and hunting outfitters to those same standards? These are some cliche questions, but I'm going to ask you anyway. If guns kill people, then do pencils misspell words? If guns kill people, then are forks and spoons responsible for the obesity epidemic? If guns kill people, then do cars cause drunk drivers? If guns kill people, then do swimming pools drown people? Anyway, if the CDC studies gun violence like you want it to, will they determine that gun violence is the cause of everything bad, or simply a symptom of a society in decline? The former sounds like something a government agency would do. Will the CDC research mention that most school shooters, teen suicides, gangbangers, and inmates were raised by single mothers? Will the research mention that the gang members require their guns on the black market and not at licensed retailers or gun shows? Will the research mention that most of the gun violence is actually committed with illegally possessed handguns and not rifles of any kind? Will the research mention that the guns are used millions more times in self-defense than in homicide or suicide? Will the research say that guns are much safer in the hands of law-abiding citizens? If the CDC research gets these results, will you people accept those results? Because I'm still waiting for you to accept the results of the 2016 election and the Mueller report. Did you know that in 2013 the CDC already studied gun violence, and guess what? It had results people like you didn't want or accept? Did you know that the El Paso shooter was also a left-wing environmentalist? Did you know that the Dayton shooter was a socialist who had strong support for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren? Why did you media parasites not cover the Dayton shooter as much as you did the El Paso shooter? Why did you blame Trump for shootings in Christchurch and El Paso but not Bernie Sanders for when one of his supporters shot at Republican congressmen on a baseball field? If President Trump is responsible for Las Vegas, Parkland, and El Paso shootings, then is George W. Bush responsible for Virginia Tech? Is Bill Clinton responsible for Columbine? Is Barack Obama responsible for Sandy Hook, Isla Vista, Chattanooga, Aurora, San Bernardino, and Trayvon Martin? Are Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren responsible for the Dayton shooting? Are Presidents Lincoln and Kennedy responsible for their own assassinations? Why are there standards for Trump and his supporters and a different set of standards for everyone else? Why should gun retailers like Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, and Dick's Sporting Goods cater to your demands regarding what kind of guns and ammunition they sell when people like you don't even shop there to begin with? What makes you think that Hillary Clinton could have saved the country from gun violence when she couldn't even save a CIA annex in Libya that wasn't supposed to be there in the first place? Can you show me any evidence that the presence of a gun will turn you into Edward Hyde and you will suddenly turn back into Henry Jekyll once the gun is removed? If a gorilla killed an alligator with an AR-15 to save a Muslim refugee child while its transgender parent was in the bathroom, whose side would you be on? Because I'd be on the gorilla's team 100%. If college campuses are rape cultures where 1 in 5 female students will be raped or sexually assaulted, why are you against college students, including women, carrying guns on college campuses? Did you know that bump stocks actually make a rifle less accurate, so what difference does it make if they're legal to own or not? Did you know that it's called a suppressor, not a silencer? Has it ever occurred to you that it would mostly be hunters and sport shooters using suppressors? Did you know that contrary to what you might have seen in a Hollywood movie, you can still hear a rifle or pistol go off with a suppressor? In fact, did you know that suppressors, as well as hollow points and pistol grips, make guns safer and easier to use? To Michael Moore, why do you claim that most white Americans own guns because they're afraid of racial minorities, when I never met a single white gun owner who owns a gun for that same reason? Mr. Moore, can you explain with a rational argument how it is racist to own a gun? If the NRA only cares about white gun owners and making them afraid of brown-skinned minorities, how do you explain Colion Noir? How do you explain the fact that the NRA came to the defense of Josephine Burns, Shaneen Allen, and Otis McDonald? To the people who made the documentary series Rest in Power, the Trayvon Martin story, yes, I actually watched every episode of that. Why did you depict gun rights and white supremacy as if it is one and the same? If the Second Amendment was really meant to protect slavery, as Tom Hartman claims, then how come the word slave is never mentioned in the Second Amendment? Why does it say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and not the right of the people to keep and own slaves shall not be infringed, Mr. Hartman? Mr. Hartman, if standing armies during times of peace can lead to tyranny, then why should the Second Amendment be repealed because we have a standing army? Can you explain with a rational argument how limiting the types of firearms we can or can't own, limiting the kinds of ammunition we can or can't own, limiting where we can or can't carry our firearms, how to acquire them, and what capacity magazines we can or can't have is not an infringement on the Second Amendment? At what point is my right to keep and bear arms not being infringed? Here are some things I've seen in some old cartoons. Elmer Fudd trying to hunt Bugs Bunny with a shotgun, Porky Pig trying to hunt Daffy Duck with a shotgun, Goofy going tiger hunting in South Asia, Goofy, Donald Duck, and Mickey Mouse going moose hunting, Donald Duck having a collection of shotguns and taxidermy mounts in his log cabin, Donald Duck firing a machine gun on a crowd, and Bugs Bunny shooting a coughing audience member with a revolver. Why do you think parents at the time those cartoons first aired didn't make a big deal about their children seeing stuff like that? Why do I have a feeling if those cartoons were aired today, many parents in California, New York, and New Jersey would go absolutely nuts? Are you aware that despite what you may have seen on Beavis and Butthead, there is no conventional firearm you can get at any retailer that can bring down an airplane? When Joe Biden said that magazines that hold more than 2 bullets should be banned, are you morons aware that the vast majority of firearm magazines hold more than 2 rounds? Regarding the 2018 NRA convention, where the Secret Service ordered NRA members to not have guns present when Vice President Mike Pence was giving his speech, how dare you accuse the NRA of infringing on gun rights when that's exactly what you do with a passion? How dare you accuse the NRA of infringing on their members' gun rights when such laws were put in place by the Secret Service and not the NRA? How dare you accuse the NRA of not caring about my gun rights when you never cared about anybody's gun rights? How dare you accuse the NRA of not caring about Philando Castile's gun rights when you never cared about the gun rights of Otis McDonald, Josephine Burns, Shaneen Allen, or any American of any race? How is taking guns away from law-abiding citizens because criminals have them any less absurd than limiting what an athletic person can eat so an obese person can lose weight? How is it any less absurd than castrating yourself because your neighbor has too many kids? Did you know that the neighbors of the San Bernardino shooters were suspicious of them, but because of people like you and the political correctness you have poisoned the country with, they didn't report their suspicions? Did Cenk Uygur, or however you pronounce it, in the aftermath of the San Bernardino shooting, why were you shouting furiously that the shooter was a white man, and then when it turned out that it was a Muslim couple who were behind the attack, your reaction to that was very different? To Steve Shives, Tom Hartman, Michael Moore, Don Lemon, Chris Cuomo, Cory Booker, Beto O'Rourke, David Pakman, Kyle Kulinski, Cenk Uygur, and everyone else on the Young Turks. If you think that me surrendering my Century Arms RAS-47 will stop a shooting, despite the fact that I will never do that, then will you cut your penis off to prevent a rape? If the gun control laws you want actually pass, and they increase the amount of violence because, surprise, surprise, criminals don't follow laws, will you give us our gun rights back? Because I can reference Illinois, California, New Jersey, and New York as proof that you won't. Why is Ted Kennedy on a terror watch list? Did you know that there are no people on a terror watch list, but names are? Did you know that innocent people have been put on a terror watch list without being informed or told why? Did you know that people have been barred from getting on a plane because they have the same name as someone who is on a terror watch list? Do you approve of people's guns being confiscated based on an accusation that can't be proven? If the said accused turns out to be innocent, will he or she get their gun rights back? Shouldn't people on a watch list be allowed to go to a judge and a jury to prove that they are innocent before they are denied the right to own a gun? If not, then how are you different than Nazi Germany or the Soviet Union? Why are you okay with judges and bureaucrats putting names on watch lists in secret? Why are you okay with people violating the right to due process? Under the Constitution, aren't we all innocent until proven guilty? In a free society, doesn't punishment come after the crime? Can you promise me that red flag laws won't be abused by people like you? If red flag laws require no criminal charges, what will protect people like me from being abused for political reasons? If government can just take away someone's constitutional rights by deciding that said person is dangerous and not proving it, then how are they constitutional rights? Will Antifa members and Black Panthers be put on terror watch lists? How dare you call Trump the new Hitler when you want to take people's right to own a gun away without due process? If people who are being investigated by the FBI shouldn't be allowed to own a gun, then why did you vote for someone who is being investigated by the FBI in 2016? What makes you think that red flag laws that many of you support will at no point be used against you? Would you like it if alt-right nutheads used red flag laws against Muslims, blacks, socialists, or Hispanics? That would be very bad. If people who simply shouted out of anger just once have red flag laws used against them or get banned from owning a gun, then who under those circumstances would be allowed to own a gun? If someone wants to use red flag laws against me, will I be properly investigated? Will I be innocent until proven guilty? Will I be allowed to keep my guns until there is undeniable evidence to prove that I am a danger to those around me? If someone were to falsely report me, would he or she face legal repercussions if it turned out the allegations against me were false? If allegations against me were proven false, will I get my guns back? If a gun buyback program is initiated, are you absolutely sure every gun owner will line up to sell their guns? If I were to sell the government my guns, how much money will I get for each gun? Will I get the exact amount of money I used to purchase those guns? Will the government have enough money for the buybacks? What if I refuse to sell my guns to the government because of their history of violence? Did you know that the gun buyback program in Australia was actually a confiscation because it was mandatory and wasn't optional? Did you know that the gun buyback program in Australia only removed 1/4 of all of Australia's privately owned guns? What will happen to American gun owners who refuse to sell you their guns? Will you threaten to arrest and prosecute those who won't surrender their guns like they did in Australia? Did you know that the Australian gun owners were forced to sell their guns to the government and weren't given an option? How is any of that democratic? Are you absolutely sure that criminals, gangsters, and others who intend to inflict harm will line up to sell their guns to the government? If they don't, and they start shooting people who don't have guns to protect themselves, then what will you do? Without a national gun registry, how exactly will the government locate gun owners who haven't complied with the laws? Are you aware that Baltimore had a gun buyback program in 1974 and, surprise, the criminals kept their guns and the crime rate in Baltimore only increased? What if I told you that there are more privately owned guns in Australia today than there were before all their gun control laws were passed? Did you know that more Americans are killed in vehicle collisions and by gun violence, despite the fact that there are a lot more regulations on cars than on guns? How will gun control stop lunatics from going on shooting sprees when driving laws haven't stopped crazy or reckless drivers or drunk drivers? Did you know that the Aurora theater shooter passed several theaters that were closer to his home and more crowded because guests were allowed to bring guns to those theaters? So you say that the Supreme Court was wrong on the Second Amendment on the Heller versus D.C. case. Can you explain with a rational argument how the Second Amendment isn't an individual right while all the other amendments are? To black people, are you aware that gun control as well as welfare birth control, minimum wage, and Social Security were put in place by Democrats as part of the eugenics movement to keep blacks and other undesirable groups impoverished and dependent on the government? If I'm wrong, then how do you explain the fact that the rich white Democrats who rule black majority cities like Chicago, Detroit, and Baltimore live in gated communities with armed security, while the common black folk live in the impoverished ghettos where crime is rampant, criminals run wild, there's not a lot of jobs, and the public schools absolutely suck? To you, March for Our Lives morons. One of you, I can't remember your name, said that if we give you an inch, you'll take a mile. So my question is, what does that mile look like? If you take that mile, will you want another mile, and another mile after that? Do you punk kids know that dictators like Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, and Adolf Hitler used historically and economically ignorant children like you to bully, intimidate, and silence political dissidents? So how are you not the very Nazis you claim to be fighting against? What is your position on Kyle Kushev, a Parkland shooting survivor who is against gun control? Why does the lamestream media not give him a platform the way they gave David Hogg one? Why should I be intimidated by a horde of spoiled, pampered brats who know nothing about guns and resort to demonizing opponents instead of engaging in honest discussion? How is me owning a gun and not using it to harm anybody in any way comparable to yelling fire in a crowded theater? Are you familiar with the late Senator Howard Metzenbaum, if that's how you pronounce it correctly, one of America's strongest advocates for gun control? Are you familiar with his famous quote, "If you don't ban all guns, you might as well ban none of them"? If most Americans support universal background checks, as you claim, then why did the movie Miss Sloan, a film where lobbyists were lobbying for universal background checks, fail at the box office, while films such as American Sniper, Lone Survivor, 12 Strong, 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi, Rambo, Last Blood, and the Expendables trilogy succeed at the box office? Can any of you fans of Kyle Kalinske or the Young Turds imagine if a fundamentalist Christian perpetrated the Orlando nightclub shooting? Am I a hypocrite because I support people's right to own guns, but I'm against people owning exotic animals as pets? Why do you want doctors to talk to patients about guns? Why is it a doctor's business what I own or what I do with my private life with firearms when that's not their job? If the NRA is a terrorist organization for wanting money to be made by selling guns, then are Mexican drug cartels terrorists for making money selling drugs and sex slaves? Is Ford, GMC, and Toyota a terrorist organization for making money selling cars? Is Five Guys a terrorist organization for making money selling cheeseburgers? Is Barnes & Noble a terrorist organization for wanting to make money selling books? Why do liberals like you complain that America has the highest number of incarcerated citizens per capita, which, don't get me wrong, is a serious problem, while wanting to make more laws that could potentially put more people in prison? Why do stories of people using guns in self-defense not get as much airtime on CNN or The View the way mass shootings do? I'm willing to fight and to die defending my constitutional right to keep and bear arms as well as other constitutional rights, but are you willing to die to take away that right from me? And my final question, since you vilify the military, vilify the police, want to defund them, my question is, you and what army is coming for my guns?